Good afternoon, everyone. I am Bianca Derani, CEO of Aperio Philanthropy, co-host of today's webinar. Aperio is a nonprofit fundraising consulting firm with a vision for a world in which everyone can thrive. We exist to unleash the power of communities to drive change by dramatically expanding resources for nonprofits. Day to day, that means we work alongside nonprofit teams to develop simpler and smarter ways to generate revenue for their missions. And our client services provide strategic advisory, hands-on support, and embedded fundraisers to organizations nationwide. As a firm created to drive change, we're thrilled to be hosting today's conversation with NYU. This is the second event in a series about expanding your donor community, and that can mean diversifying revenue streams or just finding more people who care about what you care about in the world. Specifically today, we're going to be talking about engaging next-gen donors. With that, I'm going to introduce our co-host, Michelle D'Amico.
Great. Thank you, Bianca. Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle D'Amico, and I'm the Director of Continuing Education and Public Programs at the NYU SPS Center for Global Affairs, or CGA. I'm delighted to welcome you to today's conversation on such a timely and important topic. Before I turn this over to our impressive speakers, I'd like to just tell you a little bit more about the Center for Global Affairs. Since its founding, our goal at the CGA has been to prepare global citizens to make a positive impact in the world. We do this through a variety of activities, including our 2 graduate programs, one in global affairs and another MS in global security, conflict, and cybercrime. We also offer a wide variety of skills and knowledge-based continuing education courses and offer public events such as this that expand upon the topics we cover in our classrooms. We are also very proud to be home to the George H. Heyman Jr. Program for Fundraising and Philanthropy. Through our open enrollment courses, on-site intensives, and certificate in fundraising, we offer professionally oriented educational options for those looking to enter or grow within the fundraising field. Courses are taught by practitioner faculty who bring their vast experience, expertise, and networks to the classroom. We'll send out additional information about our programs following today's conversation, so please feel free to reach out with any questions. And now I'm delighted to introduce today's moderator, Shannon Lucas. Shannon Lucas is the Chief Administrative Officer and Executive Vice President of External Engagement for the Mother Cabrini Health Foundation, where she oversees the day-to-day administrative, governance, and operational functions of the foundation, as well as the external relations, communications, community relations, and public policy teams. We are also very delighted to have Shannon serve on our advisory board and count her as one of our very esteemed alumni. And now, without further ado, I'd like to turn this over to Shannon for today's conversation.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you everybody for joining us today. It's around 12:30 in New York, so I hope you're all tucking into lunch or something exciting while we talk. So jumping into this, I am excited to start our conversation, and I've been asked to kind of set the stage a little bit about what we're going to talk about as we introduce our panel. So in today's landscape, many nonprofits are focusing on revenue diversification, which helps build organizational resiliency through uncertainty and creates opportunity for growth. Many are looking to next-gen donors to do that. Younger donors can infuse nonprofits with new perspective, energy, and revenue. By 2061, Generation X and Millennials will inherit an estimated $59 trillion in wealth from their baby boomer parents. And I think we need to take a beat on that, $59 trillion. And I also almost took a beat on 2061, but that's another story as we talk later. Experts predict that these generations' unprecedented resources and strong interest in innovative approaches to addressing global challenges will make them the most significant donors in history. But engaging them can be challenging for organizations whose fundraising strategies, systems, and cultures have been developed around previous generations' donors. Data show that these next-gen donors are laser-focused on impact, meaning achieving real change, often at a systemic level. They're more loyal to causes than to brands, and less likely to be motivated by obligation, recognition, social benefits, or tax deductions. In this session, we will all explore together what we're learning about the motivations of these next-gen donors, how we'll need to shift our approaches to engage these donors authentically and effectively, and then how to avoid some common mistakes and wasted efforts. And to do that, I'm excited to introduce you all to this great group of speakers with me. To begin with, I'm going to introduce Sarah Ozma. Sarah is a two-time graduate of the University of Florida with a BS in psychology and a Juris Doctorate, as well as a master's in nonprofit management from the University of Central Florida. She has practiced criminal defense law for the entirety of her career, representing clients charged with crimes ranging from misdemeanors to capital offenses. In addition, she is the executive director of her family's charitable foundation, the Big Nova Foundation, and she lives in Orlando with her husband, 2 daughters, and their dog, Charlie. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi.
We've also got with us today Kalpana Kanthan. Kalpana is the Chief Development Officer at the American India Foundation. In this role, she oversees the philanthropic portfolio of the US and India teams, as well as the marketing vertical in conjunction with communications, to drive AIF's strategic growth, expansion, and programmatic impact. Join me in welcoming Kalpana.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, Shannon.
Thank you. We've also got Shonda McDill with us today. And Shonda is the managing director of the Pittsburgh Public Theater with nearly 2 decades of arts management and nonprofit leadership experience. She previously worked with the Heinz Endowment since 2017 as a program officer for arts and culture, where she worked to promote the strength and vitality of a suite of Pittsburgh-based artists and arts. She also co-managed the Advancing Black Arts in Pittsburgh initiative, which received a $2 million grant from novelist and philanthropist Mackenzie Scott in 2021. Okay, big grant. Love that. Welcome, Shonda. And rounding out the panel, we have Michael Whitney. Michael is a fundraiser and campaigner with more than 20 years of experience in political campaigns and nonprofit organizations. He is currently the Senior Director of Development at Mozilla Foundation, where he leads the fundraising team working to support digital privacy and a free and open internet. Michael previously served as digital fundraising manager for both of US Senator Bernie Sanders' presidential campaigns, raising more than $400 million from millions of grassroots donors. He's trained fundraisers from agencies, nonprofits, and political parties across Europe, Oceania, and North America. Welcome, welcome, panel. Great to see you all. So I'm going to kind of start with a question to set the stage for our discussion, and maybe we can go through it in the same order we introduced everyone, starting with Sarah. But would love to hear from each of you about the lens that you bring to today's conversation. So Sarah, from your perspective, why should nonprofits be investing time and effort into engaging next-gen donors?
Well, I mean, Shannon, like you said, there's about to be a major transfer of wealth in our country from the boomer generation to your next gen donors. We're about to be the ones that are the major donors in the world, and that big transfer of wealth is going to happen, and it's important that you get ahead of it. Starting to focus on those donors now will put you in the position to not be behind when that transfer of wealth does happen. So I think that's the main point. And I think because we think so differently as a generation than those ahead of us, that you have to learn about our generation now to be prepared for the way that your organization should approach us in the future.
Thank you, Sarah. And Kalpana, same question to you. Tell us a little bit about your entry point and why we should be thinking about this next gen group.
Yeah, my question is, how could we not be thinking about them, right? Because if you want to ensure the longevity and sustainability of your organizational mission, listen, we focus at AIF on poverty alleviation in India. Unless poverty is going to be fully alleviated in the next 10 years, how could we not focus on the next generation? Because not only will they be the donors of the future, they are going to embrace these missions that we have to drive the kind of social change that will be needed, unfortunately, I suppose, right? Even 50 years from now. right? So it is absolutely crucial, especially for organizations that were created 25 years back, 50 years back. While the problems still remain, the narratives, the way in which we speak about it, the way in which we should be speaking about things to be heard by the younger generations has to be thought about now so that we can involve them in creating change in the future. So my question to you is, how could we not be thinking about them?
Amen. Shonda, same question for you.
Well, I'll try not to be repetitive. Everyone on the panel has given such great answers, but I will say, in kind of thinking about this panel, it disturbed me how transactional we do think about the next generation. From my perspective at the Pittsburgh Public, for me, it's about our mission. We want to be a true public theater. And not only do we want to do that, but we also want to make sure that we're relevant, that we're attracting and retaining talent. And so there's some other parts of our mission and vision and value. So in order to truly be who we say we want to be, we actually need first voice participation, not from that next gen as donors, but also to help be on our staff, to be on our team, to help create the change, to be the board members, right? Because, we say, how can we not? But then we don't actually empower the generation to be decision makers now. We wait until they become of the age that we think they should be to actually fully participate sometimes. And so I would just say, not to be repetitive, for me, it's about the lifelong relationships that have to start now so that your organization has the change and the arc that it needs, and that change is informed by the people who are most deeply impacted, not the people who think they know what it should look like.
I love that. And you said something small in there that I don't know if you intended, but I think it's interesting when you said the age that we think they should be. There's often a lot of assumptions sometimes about who gets to sit at the table. This is the grown-ups table of giving, but I digress. Michael, what about you?
I think that is a great point that I was going to build on anyway, because you have a cohort of people who are giving in their own ways up to this point in time, which a lot of the time is going to look like a large number of monthly recurring donations or in smaller one-time gifts, and they're not accustomed to thinking what to do at a more transformational level. And so for me, it's really about trying to think of it as a bridge for how people can explore new opportunities. But also, I think that there's a sense that I try to keep in mind of the millennial generation has just a different relationship with money and economic stress and everything else that I think is coloring how people might make decisions or about how they do that. And it's important to recognize that it's not just going to be a one-to-one carryover of the same giving behaviors.
I think that's right. And I know we kind of launched into the intros, and I don't know if I'm going to get into any HR trouble, but just quickly before we go on, what generation do each of you belong in? And I'll model. I am what people jokingly refer to as a geriatric millennial or X-ennial. Sarah, what about you?
I am a millennial, just on the edge of being a geriatric millennial.
Kalpana?
Oh, you youngsters, I am firmly Gen X and proud of it.
Excellent. Shonda, what about you?
I had to look it up. So I'm supposed to be, I guess I'm a millennial. I have a lot of gray, but yeah.
I am the geriatric on this panel, it looks like.
Well, I was going to say I have a lot of grades too, but I've got somebody who handles that. Michael, what generation are you?
Elder millennial.
There we go. I like it. So data does show that younger donors tend to be more focused on impact and values than brand and organizational legacy. As you've been thinking about engaging younger audiences, how have you seen this shift play out? Shonda, maybe we can start with you, and you can share with us a little bit about what you're learning about motivations.
Yeah. Start by saying most nonprofits that I've been a part of or were a part of my portfolio when I was in philanthropy don't have the money to do deep dives into who their audiences are. And this could just be in arts and culture, but I want to actually make that point, because when I came to the public, I was like, first of all, we don't even know who the people are. And we keep making these kind of same conversations and stereotyping generations, but can we actually do data? So in 2003, when I started, the same year, we took 6 years of our subscription and single ticket sales data and had Claritas, a firm that works here, kind of spit out who's our segmentation. In short, what I will say is we learned that post-COVID, we actually had double-digit gains with younger, more diverse theater goers. And then we looked at our programming, tried to understand, and those things that were highlighted even let us know that at our bar, we should have hard cider. We shouldn't just have wine and whatever, right? They want to drink hard cider. This is the behaviors. We even got, in the last 3 months, where have they shopped the most, right? IKEA, Burlington, whatever those things were. But what I will say is most organizations don't have the resources to do that type of deep dive and then to implement strategic change that is risk-taking to try to transform their behaviors, which might look like different partnerships we should be pursuing in terms of sponsorships or engagement. So I'm hoping I'm answering the question, but I think I've just learned we need to fully ratify even the welcoming experience of those who come to our theater from the moment they hit the door to what's at our bar, and beyond, if we truly want to engage them in participation in our organization.
Taking that step to just look around before you start to plan and execute on a strategy. Michael, similar question to you as we think about this next gen audience, thinking about impact and values versus organizational legacy. When you think about motivation and seeing that shift play out, I know you worked for Senator Sanders. I'm imagining, thinking about recurring donations, that might be part of a conversation. Talk to us a little bit about what you have experienced in this realm.
Yeah, so the median age of a donor to Bernie Sanders in 2016 was 27 years old. And in 2020, it was 31 years old. So the same people. But what I think is something that I try to keep in mind is that in watching who else raises money, at least in the political space, it's not a one-to-one transfer, and it's not a mimicry of tactics that is actually producing money. It is who is attracting people based on perceived impact and issue alignment, and that goes for organizations as well, because there is no real loyalty to a person or an entity, because I think deep down what people care about is any way possible that they can make progress on something that they care about, they're willing to do. And if they find that an organization or a elected official is no longer serving that case, their allegiance does not just keep with them, it keeps to the issue and they move their money elsewhere. And I think that, one way to think about it is to think about from a grassroots perspective that I come from, is that everyone has their monthly recurring donations to organizations, but also to their streaming services, to whatever else that they have on a monthly basis, that all stacks up as they look at their budget. And it's like, how am I evaluating where I'm putting what I have this month towards that? And it's really comes down to demonstrating that you have the ability to shift things in the direction that donors care about.
I think that's really smart. Can I ask you one little follow-up on that too? I think something unique about Senator Sanders is there is that authenticity we talked about a little bit earlier. I know we're saying the younger generations or the next gen folks care a little bit less about the individual, but I think that is a nice entry point. And I go back to the Obama campaign as well, as people start to kind of really think about, I'm giving that monthly recurring donation, but is it also tied a little bit to who, and especially that grassroots approach of Senator Sanders?
Yeah, it was definitely a factor of someone being seen as trustworthy and bucking the norms of what they would expect, which, to be honest, also played out in how we even message donors, which is, in no universe really would you send a 2,000 word fundraising email that goes deep on the issues in a way that would ever raise money? And yet those were consistently 6-figure emails for us. Um, and it's because we didn't just try to think about it as tactics or anything else, but like we wanted to even mimic the experience of, you know, someone who is going to a rally and wants to like hear about the issues and what actually matters. And authenticity and directness is going to win the day with new generations of donors.
Thank you, Michael. I'm going to pop over to Sarah for a question. Sarah, you are also a funder. Can you speak to us a little bit about navigating funding decisions with the multi-generational family foundation?
Yeah, so we are a family foundation. It's just me and my brother and my parents that are making decisions. And as you can guess, it can be complicated. There's certainly family dynamics to that because no matter what, even though I am the executive director of the Big Nova Foundation, I'm always my father's daughter, you know, at the end of the day. So there's no way to separate those things. But we think about things really differently. And, you know, I think you guys have highlighted a little bit about this, but I really care about going and meeting organizations where they are. I want to see the way that they talk to their clients. I want to feel the culture of the organization. I want to know what their values are. And my dad wants to look at their 990 form and look at their percentage of overhead over, you know, other things. And he wants to know how much their CEO is getting paid and, you know, those kinds of things. And granted, that's a really good balance for us to have, right? You know, we can see both sides, but it means that I have to think about those kinds of questions when I'm meeting with organizations, and I have to be sure that even if they are saying all the right things to me from a values perspective, that they can do their, you know, accounting well as, you know, as well, and that they are good stewards of the money, which is a great balance and important to do both things. I think it's taught me a lot about what questions to ask organizations, but also how I present an organization to my family when we're talking about it. You know, that I remember that when I'm talking to my dad about a cause that just, you know, really touches my heart, that he does not care about that part of it, you know, like he wants to know, are they spending money efficiently? And I make sure that I think through those things. That being said, I think that it's really important for an organization when they're looking at funders to be able to answer both questions, to be able to talk about what their values are, but also know their, you know, their numbers and all of those things. And B, to know who you are talking to when you're talking to them, you know, to know that for me, it matters that when I walk into your organization, the way you talk to your clients is huge to me. And if I feel uncomfortable with that or then it's a no for me, you know. But if at the same time, when you come to meet with my dad, if all you're doing is talking about, you know, the feel good stuff, it's going to be a no for him. So you have to know your audience really well and know that, you know, what matters to them.
Thank you, Sarah. I love the family dynamics. We might have to get back into that because I want to kind of hear how some of these grants are made. But Kalpana, AIF is at an interesting inflection point as you bring the next generation into your community and mission. How are you approaching that shift?
Yeah. You know, we are currently around 24 years old. So we are standing at that point where we will be celebrating our 25th anniversary, right? Which is a very big deal for a nonprofit. And what we should remember is that AIF was created by a community of people coming together. They were all from the Indian diaspora. And the whole idea of AIF was blessed by then President Bill Clinton and then Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee in India to create this bridge of civic engagement. So let's remember that the cohort of leaders who created AIF collectively are, whether we like it or not, reaching a stage in their lives where they may be aging out of being the leaders of AIF and need to bring in that next generation of leaders who will lead AIF for the next 25 years, right? So how are we approaching it? one of the things that AIF is really focusing on, and I think many such organizations that have a history like ours or flavor like ours are doing it, is to have this life stage approach, where we are not only connecting with people at a certain level of giving or at a certain level of financial affluence, right, to be our donors, but we are connecting with families. We have something called the Young Professionals Program, right, which is you're connecting with young executives in their 20s. You technically age out of the YP program by 35. So imagine, right? So these are young people who are looking for community, a community of like-minded people who share an affinity for certain causes, come together and have fun, educate themselves, and hold various events, etc., under the name of AIF. But it's actually a kind of watering hole for people to come together of that certain age group. We have something called the Youth Ambassadors Program to engage high school students. These are high school students across the country who want to be engaged in social impact. Now, listen, it's good for everyone's resumes when they're applying to college, but it's also very good for their souls to be doing something like this and getting that exposure to the whole area of social impact. And we really teach them tangible skills in fundraising, marketing, etc. So that name AIF is part of their vocabulary. They are not going to be able to give to us, but we are there in their consciousness so that over time, when the time comes for them to start giving themselves, AIF already has a piece, a place in their heart, shall we say, right? And then we are doing the collegiate programs, which is for young groups in college growing students. We have something called the Circle of Hope, which is a circle of women coming together to fund a program in AIF, usually an innovative pilot that costs about $25,000 to $30,000. And the entry point is lower. You don't want to exclude people, you want to include more. Now, our COH, Circle of Hope in Chicago, follows a mother and daughter model. So it's mothers and daughters who get together to evaluate various proposals. The young girls in middle school, and these are girls in middle school and elementary sometimes, who are asking us questions, trying to understand the project, etc. So it's the life stage approach that really matters for us. And that's one way in which we are doing this.
I think that's terrific. And I think I love that idea of kind of imprinting AIF in their mind, because it really drives into that question of why that we talked about earlier, caring about the sort of cause rather than the brand. And I think to do that, you have to be able to tell strong stories and make sure that stories resonate with your donor audience.
Yes.
While I still have you on the mic, could you tell us a little bit about how you guys think about telling great narrative arcs for younger donors?
Yeah, it's different. It's different from, I was trained in journalism, film, and television decades ago, right? And the way we need to storytell now is so much informed by the media that we work with now, right? Younger generations are digital natives in a way that I love how I'm dating myself, right? My generation was not. We still used VHS tapes, right? I mean, don't even ask, right? And now
you don't need to ask. We're all nodding.
You're all nodding. Yes, thank God, because you're geriatric millennials, right?
Sorry.
So how do we storytell? Now, here's the thing about storytelling. It is always about touching someone in their hearts and in their emotions, right? So that will always remain the holy grail of storytelling. How you tell the story changes. The media change, right? So for the younger generations, what we are seeing is they value authenticity over perfection. So, even for our Insta reels and everything, we used to make these perfect looking videos. And the feedback we got from younger people was, it looks very professional. And my thing was, yeah, shouldn't it look polished? But no, it needn't. It should look authentic, right? So the things that were prized by previous generations in storytelling, which were, a very professional, polished look, now we're going for the more, on the ground, authentic look, where the person who's hearing the story is also telling the story. So it's a young person who's kind of shooting their experience and then sharing it, right? So what we're finding is, and I think Michael said this, emails, No long emails. No one has the attention span. People rarely read that much. The question is, how do you use the various multimedia tools to tell a story in a way that it is being experienced, heard, felt, and is driving people to action? So I think we're using a lot of flexibility now. We are really kind of reinventing the wheel. In terms of stewardship, what are we doing? We're doing things called grativids, which are these videos that we do to thank our younger donors. It's not an email saying, "Thank you so much for the work that you did in this campaign," but it's a 40-second video saying, "I'm so and so, and I just want to tell you that what you did for this campaign was so life-changing. This is what we raised, and this is what we were able to do." So just kind of keeping our eye out for those different ways in which we can connect with our audiences, our younger audiences, through storytelling and stewardship, basically.
Very innovative. I love that idea. And I also love too, as you think about the next gen donors being sort of digital natives, I kind of want to go back over to Michael, who is our digital engagement expert. Michael, digital engagement requires quite a bit of data and strategy. And what have you learned about communicating with younger donors in the digital realm? And are there any common mistakes that people make?
Yes. The common mistake is believing that social media is ever in your control, because it is not. It is an algorithm designed for the profit of others. And um, if your goals conflict with their algorithmically derived profit, then you're not going to win. And so that is like a core thing that I really try to reinforce. To give you an idea of how, like, I put a very, very, very high premium on knowing exactly where what dollars come from, to be as specific as possible, down to which specific link on a web page or which specific button. Um, and one of the things I can tell you is that uh, even on Bernie Sanders' campaign, social media never rose above 6% of the overall amount of money that we raised. Um, and that is with the national spotlight on everything that was happening. Um, and that, you know, there's SMS and there's email and there's like other awareness of where people are in a digital media space to reinforce that. Um, but when it comes down to it, it's a matter of knowing that direct contact is still going to be the way to go, because at least you're in control then. In terms of how that relates to message, um, it's not like cutesy social media posts that like move people to action necessarily. If anything, social media is like an amplifier of what you're doing in other spaces, and that it's all part of a single toolkit that you use at various times for which audiences you're speaking to.
Thank you, Michael. I'm going to go back to you, Kalpana, just for a second, as we were talking about authenticity and those authentic connections with donor groups. When you think about that direct connection and the relationship side of this, how do you approach middle and major gift relationships with younger donors? So we've talked a little bit about the grassroots piece, but as you start to build relationship and think moves management, anything coming to mind for you?
Yeah, and absolutely. Again, it's a journey. And, I think we all experience this in our nonprofits where 80% of your fundraising revenue comes from 20% of your donors, right? And those are your major donors, right? And when you are thinking of younger generations, it's a journey for them to get to that part where they make what we traditionally understand to be major gifts. But I think one way to look at it is to kind of redefine this, reframe this notion of a major gift. It need not just be money. When you're talking to a younger generation, the way they invest their time, their energy, their ability to do outreach for you, for example, to connect with an influencer who has a following of, 2 million or something, and really build the strong relationship with them in terms of your mission. And of course, it should be aligned with their sense of values, etc., to get the message out. That's a kind of major gift for me at this point when I'm looking at trying to bring in younger people into the AIF family, right? What we're looking to do is to connect with their sense of purpose and not make an ask, because it is off-putting to ask for money all the time, right? And it is not just money that people can invest in us. And I think younger generations, the way we can connect with them is to get them to invest what they're able to invest and what would really add value to a place like AIF at this point in time, right? And here are the investments we need to make. We need to get to know what drives these younger people. What is it that they wish they were asked by us? What is it that they wish we'd stop asking them for? Right? How can we meet them where we are? How can we engage them in ways that are meaningful to them so that they choose to invest their assets in us? And their assets, honestly, their social media following could be their biggest asset, and it could be something that they choose to leverage on behalf of a nonprofit like us, right? What I would, it's not just me. I mean, I think what we all are kind of thinking of is how can we grow with these younger people, right? And how can they grow with us, and how can we grow with them, and how can we create this truly collaborative relationship that has longevity and meaning in the long run, that has meaning in the long run, basically. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question? I got very
Yeah,
clear.
but it actually, and I saw Michael and Sarah both jumped up too. Please go jump in, Michael.
I think that it's a really important point about the diversity of asks, because um, and I want to say that it's not in a, oh my God, I get too many fundraising asks from you way. I think it is showing a diversity of tactics in order to achieve impact in different ways, whether that is, so for example, at Mozilla Foundation, our mobilization team, which does like anything around supporter activation, petitions, etc., is a part of the development team on purpose, because we see that as a core aspect of not only sourcing potential donors, but for giving them opportunities to have an impact in a way that can also deliver softer fundraising asks on the back end of more actiony different campaigns. And one of the things that we uniquely offer at Mozilla Foundation is the ability to donate your voice to our open source voice recognition database that seeks to eliminate bias in voice recognition technology. And so for us, it is really just, it's not about a ladder of engagement. I only think about it as like a spider web of engagement, and you can crawl across the different little points in order to help move it across. And yes, we want their money, but you're going to be more likely to get their money if they also help in other ways too.
I love the
Yes.
metaphor of a spider web. That's a really great way of thinking about it. Everything's interconnected. You could go up, down, left, right. There's a lot of diversity of how you can engage in those donors.
Yeah, Shannon,
And
I was just going to add that I
Shannon,
think Michael is, sorry, that Michael is right that that millennial and younger generations are more likely to give eventually, that they want to engage with an organization and feel like they're part of it. And then once they feel part of it, then the dollars come, which I think is a difference between generations above us. And so if you think of ways to get them involved in your values and your culture and what your mission is, then they can turn into dollar donors.
Kalpana, did you want to close that out for us?
Yes, I'm so eager to jump in because Michael, Sarah, you've made so much sense. And I do want to distill it down to the fundament of fundraising. Fundraising is not about money. It's about relationships. And those of us who've been in the business long enough appreciate that it is all about meaningful relationships. It is all about meaningful engagement, stewardship, and nurturing a relationship. And the investments show up. The investment can be of any type. And ultimately, yes, we are fundraisers. That is the metric that we are all measured on. But it is ultimately about relationships. And I think that's what Michael was also saying when he spoke about the spider web of opportunities to engage. How can we keep building those relationships with a life stage approach so that they feel that sense of trust and confidence in our mission, in our capacity to deliver. And when they are ready to invest dollars, they choose to invest. Ultimately, you're going to invest in a company that you believe in, that has your trust. And trust is not built in one email.
Absolutely. And I love that you said that. Others have heard me moderate similar panels in this space. My former boss and mentor used to always say she wasn't a fundraiser, she's a development professional, because she is constantly developing relationships. And just a quick story is when she retired, she came into my office one day in tears, and she was genuinely upset that she felt like she didn't have any friends. And as she went through her contact list, it's all donors. And I actually said, Helen, that is a sign that you've done your job well, that you see these people when you don't have to see these people, when there's not a transaction happening in front of you, is that your job in developing the relationship, you've done it. And she does have friends too, just in case, she's watching this somewhere. But I think that is the core of what development and fundraising is. Yes, the dollars matter, but the relationships are really what keep us going long term. I want to jump to Sarah quickly as a funder. As you think about building partnerships with organizations, right? What advice would you have to fundraisers, and what kind of communication, engagement, relationship feels authentic to you as they think about applying for grants or engaging with Big Nova Foundation?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked some about it, but I would say that to me, I always want to come to you. I think that a lot of organizations think, let's cater to our funders, let's make everything easy for them, let's go to their office. But I want to be in your space. So I want you to invite me there. And so I can see it and feel it. And I think that is always a good first start, is to say, come show off your organization to the funders, show them the great volunteers that you have, the great staff members that are doing the work in your space. I think that is something that I really think is important. The other thing I think is, like we've said, you have to get to know me, to know what matters to me, so that then when you're putting in a grant request, you're tailoring it to what matters to me. So you need to know that I care about case management when it comes to the unhoused. I think that that's super important, right? I think that like you have to fix that problem that way, right? But if you're an organization that helps the unhoused, and you come and ask me for more money for another building, that's maybe not be the right spot for me. Like, what I think matters is case management, right? So you don't know that about me unless you take the time to actually get to know me as a person. And that's the best way for you to be successful in your grant request. And so I think that is maybe something that's new and important, that instead of, like we've talked about, relying on your brand of being the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, we are the best in the business. What I want to know is, like, do you do research, and do you do research for kids, right? Because that's going to be a spot that matters to me. And I think that finding those things about me, and you can only do that through personal communication. And that's going to be through, in person, go to lunch, bring me to your place, invite me to your event, like, let me sit and be with your people. And then I think I just wanted to touch on, like, the social media aspect, like we talked about. I'm never going to donate because I saw a great social media ad. Like, I'm not going to click the ad and say, here, have some money. But what I am going to do is go to your website from that. And I am going to, like, say, hey, maybe this fits with me. Maybe I'll send you an email and we'll have a phone call or something like that. I think social media should be looked at as a way to build connections, not necessarily fundraise. Like, you're targeting people because you think we have something in common, right? And I love to be able to then share to my friends, this is a cause that matters to me. And this is something that I want to connect with and I want you to connect with as well. So that's the way I use social media when it comes to organizations. Is really just about values, trending or showing what I care about to other people, not about, hey, donate $5 to this cause or whatever it is. I think the thing that I'm just trying to get across is that it has to be personal. It has to be, it can't be a target email that goes out to 300 people. Like, you have to find, and I know that makes it harder, right? And more man hours and all of that. But if you're trying to develop the relationships, you have to actually develop a relationship.
I was going to say, Sarah, I'm sure our participants are going to be in the Q&A requesting your social media handles and email. There's going to be a lot of lunch and dinner requests for you. But I want to just chat a little bit with Shonda about the current kind of philanthropic landscape. So as this space becomes more and more polarized, what advice would you give to your nonprofit colleagues about how we can come together to meet this particular moment? And then maybe a follow-up question to that is, give us a sense of what role engaging with the next gen donors might play in that as well.
I want to touch on what Sarah said in terms of, and I've probably heard Michael say it, and as well as Culpin, like, you have to know what your mission is and what your vision is. For me in philanthropy, I saw a lot of organizations. So I'll speak in philanthropy, and then I'll also speak as a nonprofit leader. But in philanthropy, when I worked at the Heinz Endowments, I saw a lot of people who would just transform for the financial benefit. So even if I came to whatever your program was, or if I got to know you because you so needed the support, oftentimes I saw people adjusting their strategy to meet whatever we were funding instead of kind of broadening and trying to find the appropriate person to fund what they needed. Because what then you're doing is spending a year or two or whatever, if it's a multi-year grant, becoming another institution that you're actually not anyway, and you're never going to do that well. So your final report is never going to reflect success. So there's kind of this vicious cycle that I think a lot of nonprofits and people find themselves in. However, I don't disparage it because people are in need. We would reject almost 90% of the people who applied. So even with the amount of funding we were providing as a leading entity, there was still much more need that wasn't being met. And so I just want to say, put that qualifier in there. I think I like clarity. I think clarity is kindness, So for me, I don't, and I will speak from the arts and culture world that is very much jeopardized in this moment. I don't think that artists are going to make art. Cultural bearers are going to do culture, even when the finances might be torn from them. If there's not alignment with certain foundations, I think it becomes more difficult. But you will. I've rarely seen in history a time where art stopped being made, right? Or culture stopped being formed by those who are living. It makes it much more difficult. Those people live harder lives. They don't have insurance. I just came from the West End of London. It was a totally different experience than I have here in the States in terms of art making and how we wrap ourselves around the concept and importance of culture. And I speak to that because that has to do to me with next gen and development and how we do things. I think in philanthropy, as organizations, we're very good at saying the things that we know. I've even seen us do it with donors or with funders or with, we know even what people want to hear. But when I sit back, which I often do, and watch behaviors, they don't often marry. And what I think this generation that we're talking about, 18 to 44 in our case, which we are more urban dwellers, as this says in our report, if we talk about being authentic, it's not just about what you say, it's actually how what you're saying is marrying to your implementation on a consistent basis. And so I think that it's important for whatever organizations are facing, one, to make a real clear decision about survival. Audre Lorde said, you might as well speak, because we were never meant to survive. So at the end of the day, if your organization is not one that you truly believe has an impact on a purpose, I think it makes it much more difficult, and you won't be able to tell anybody that story in an authentic way. But I also think when you look at it in terms of having conversations with anyone, but particularly a generation that is seeking authenticity and impact, I think it is critical that regardless of how philanthropy itself is stacking up against you, that you remain adamant about your principles. And I find in this moment in time, it is even more important. And I find a lot of my colleagues are currently scrubbing their websites, not speaking what they had said before were their mission, vision, and values. And it will be interesting to see from in the next 5, 10, 15 years, regardless, who people become in this moment.
Yeah, I often say the pendulum swings wildly, right? Your mission, your purpose, that is the center, and the center must hold, because you've got to still speak to those donors, as the pendulum goes. So I think that's a really, really great insight. Sarah, you popped off
Yeah, I
mute.
just wanted to, from a funder perspective, reiterate what Shonda said about not trying to reinvent yourself to get funding. That funders can see that too. That when I see someone come in with an application and I'm like, but you've never done this before. This isn't who you are. That is a red flag to me, unless you're telling me you're expanding your mission in this way because of this reason that matters to your mission, that's a different thing. But if you're trying to say, this organization cares about conservation and, I am an urban planning and maybe we can somehow fit them, square peg round hole, like that, you're just devaluing yourself, I think, at that point. I think that you're in a much better position to find the right funder. I think that says so much more about you as an organization than you trying to cater to the fund.
And as a fellow funder, we're happy to have that conversation too. So if we're not the right funder, it's okay to have conversations on, do you know others who might be interested? That's a, no harm, no foul in that discussion. But Shonda, yes.
Yeah, I just was also just trying to say that I think at the end of the day, part of what I'm reflecting on and kind of in awe of is, even in my graduate studies, I felt like I was learning about the silver curtain or the people who were dying, that generation. And I just want to say we all become that generation. I don't know that much of this conversation has changed over time, because in any generation, when I talk to older people, we're at a 50th anniversary point for the public theater. Clearly behaviors change, right? But what I mean about the kind of conversation being similar is that even when I was studying 25 years ago, we were talking about, well, what happens when this generation that has the wealth is dying off, and how do you talk to them differently than your generation, which is very different than their generation? And I think it goes back to what I hear all my colleagues saying, which is you don't kind of have to worry about trends if you actually know who you're talking to, if you actually forge a relationship. And right now, my biggest thing is time at the public. It's not, we want to have the relationships, we want to meet people, but as the shift is happening and as we're becoming a different organization with different behavioral patterns, those with the highest amount of disposable wealth are not communicating in that way, and we can only focus in one direction. So do we we can try to be balanced, but when you really talk about making an impact and us becoming more deeply rooted in our identity, and seeing a 30% uptick post-COVID in those who are part of this generation, the conversation is different. And we receive a lot of email about our art and different things that says, you're no longer the public we knew. But maybe if we were doing this in their generation, we would have been the public for them at that moment. So we become these different things and behavior changes. And I think that that's just important to note. And I'm trying to find what is the difference in this moment, that is not just about the wealth transfer, that is not just, but is about who we are as individuals in our core and what we're seeking in this moment in time. And I think it's hard to have this conversation for me because of that, when so much is happening in the world that cannot be separated from how that impacts people's decision making about how they spend their time and what they spend their resources or participation writ large, what they participate in.
Yeah, it's a good transition for us to jump into some questions, because I hear you. And one of the things that I think is interesting is a little bit sometimes the tactics on the conversation is the same, but what might be different is the tools in front of us and the media in front of us. But let me go to a question, which is, what are the most effective channels to reach younger generations? And what are some ways to incorporate a digital storytelling strategy to effectively reach them within these channels? So the question's already assuming there's some channels, but I'll open it up to any and all of you on this. And I might start while y'all think of an answer, which is, I'll give an example of my own giving. I made a gift when President Carter died to Habitat for Humanity. I was excited to do it, made a nice donation. Not even, I think what President Carter passed away in January. A couple months later, I get a full solicitation phone call. And I was sort of taken aback. I haven't gotten a phone call like that in 15, 20 years. And I would never be rude. I had a lovely chat with the person. I actually made an additional pledge, but as I hung up, I kind of resented it. I was like, why call my phone in the middle of the workday? And I think when we talk about effective channels, I'm used to a phone call being something that is something for work or something for like my own personal health life. I am not it felt like an intrusion to me. And I was the person. My first job ever was being a phone fundraiser. When I was in college, I would call and chat with people. So as you all think about channels, are there channels that you prefer? Are there channels that you don't prefer? I'm happy if you want to not champion the telephone. Is the telephone effective for anyone?
I saw that Michael had unmuted. Michael, did you
Yeah.
want to say something? You can jump.
Personally, if I got a phone call, I would not even answer it to hear what it's about, to be very clear, even if I had just given a lot of money to an organization. And so that's not just, me being a curmudgeon, but it's also like, if I gave you a donation online, then I expect online communication, and then it comes back in that way, right? I think there's a challenge in crossing channels or mixing it up that is based on privacy and consent with how people initially did that. Again, bias speaking as an organization that focuses on digital privacy, but people really care about it. And I think that younger generations get a little skeptical if there's like background data collection on you in a way that they're not used to expecting, or that people who are more involved in higher giving know to expect.
Yeah. Listen, I hear you completely. I also wouldn't have picked up the call, Shannon. I think you're so polite to have picked it up and made an additional pledge. And by the way, I am the generation that cold called as well. So been through that whole gamut. I think, the what shall I say, most natural answer would be, TikTok or Insta or whatever. But I just want to say, let's not underestimate the power of our websites. Because, Shannon, was it Shannon who said it, or Sarah, that, you'll send me I'll see a social media thing. I will not make a pledge or a gift, but I will go to your website because I want to assess and evaluate the integrity of the organization, the kind of impact you have. I want to see what the Guide Star rating is, what the Charity Navigator rating is. I want to make up my own mind by looking at that repository of information. So while I don't know if one would consider the website to be a channel of communication, let's not forget how important it is and how on our website we advertise channels for communication, right? If you're interested in this, contact this. And agreeing with you, Shannon and Michael, we don't want to impose on people who would be interested. We want to give them the channels that they can connect with us on when they are interested. So that was just something that I wanted to throw out there.
Thank you. And we're at the end of the hour here. I want to thank all of you. I know it went so fast. I saw Kaufman's face. I was like, oh. Thank you all. And thank you to the audience. A lot of the questions, I know we did that one, but quite a few were about channels and infrastructure. So would love to continue this conversation. I think that Michelle is going to send some additional information in the chat about upcoming events. But it's been a true pleasure talking with you all. I think this is a conversation, as Shonda said, that is a timeless one that will continue on. And I wish all of you nothing but success in all of your endeavors, and the same for all of our audience. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And this was wonderful. We could have spoken for 2 more hours.
Truly.
Thank you all.
Thank you.